Thanks, everybody. So my name is Lucia Turpak. I'm a medical anthropologist, originally from the Washington, D.C. area. I'm really passionate about understanding the cultural, institutional, structural root causes of mental illness, the things that, keep us unhealthy. And I did my master's research at an ibogaine clinic where I looked at, I interviewed some folks from the States and Canada who were there to help out with issues with addiction. So really passionate about addiction research. I don't know if there's anything else I should say.
And you're phenomenal. We're so
thank you. I'm really excited about this opportunity, really passionate about building community. I've been going to the NOAC meetings for a couple years, and I just think what this group does is pretty amazing. So thank you all so much for having me. And now I'd love to introduce my dear friend Nicole Lilly. So Nicole specializes in holistic transformation. As an experiential educator, she elevates inherent wisdom of each individual's innate capacities within the context of their living ecosystem. She has a master's degree in body psychotherapy from Naropa, and she's a licensed massage therapist. She has 12 years in the healing arts and specializes in trauma-informed approaches. Formerly a registered psychotherapist in Colorado, she relinquished the credential in favor of a multidisciplinary practice that expands beyond the confines of individual licensed professions. She lives in Denver as an active advocate, researcher, and national presenter in the entheogenic space. And I also want to add that she is one of our researchers working on the psilocybin practitioner study through the NOAC Society and CSU. So tonight, Nicole is sharing some thoughts with us about entheogenic crossroads, promises, pitfalls, and possibilities. So without further ado, welcome Nicole Lilly.
Thank you so much, Lucia. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. This is one of my favorite gatherings to be part of in Denver. And NOAC Society is my favorite psychedelic community in all the land. I don't know about you, but I love the folks at NOAC, and I just feel there is such pure heart that comes out of everything that they do. So it's a real honor and privilege to be here with all of you this evening. So the topic is entheogenic crossroads, and I'm sure it's no secret why this is the topic, because we are at a crossroads at this point in time with a lot of things that are happening. And so my intention this evening is really to just bring awareness to what's happening in the space. Some things you may be aware of, some things you're maybe not aware of. I'll do my best to try to leave bias and opinion out of it, but I am human. So just know that it's okay if you don't agree with everything that I have to say. My perspectives, really my truest intention is to ask good questions, because that's really what we're here to do, is ask each other good questions so that we can formulate our own opinions. And that's what I do when I was a therapist, and I still do it in transformational work. And it's always turning people back to themselves. So, promises, pitfalls, and possibilities. We're being made some big promises nowadays. What we're not talking about quite as much is the pitfalls. And so I'll spend a little more time there, and that's intentional. And then I really hope to leave adequate space to also talk about possibilities. Because if one of the things that these medicines teach us, it's how to think about what's possible, how to think beyond what our current structures, current belief systems, and limitations are. So why do you care what I have to say? Why should you listen to me? Why would it be important? So I just put this together as a quick visual of some of my background. And Lucia mentioned I've been in the healing arts the past 12 years, and that's really been my focus, and that's cut across multiple domains of psychotherapy, somatics, bodywork, spirituality. And before that, I spent a whole career doing experience design. And this is a disciplinary field which involves research, involves vision, strategy, and design, and it involves speaking to people and understanding what their needs are and creating and crafting solutions in an iterative sort of way over time, so that you're actually creating the best possible outcome that's a win-win for everyone. And so I say this and I highlight this because I really believe that there are principles from this discipline that can be really, really useful in this space if we just take the moment and stop and understand what those steps are. And this all combines beautifully with the entheogenic and psychedelic space, which I've been involved in multiple capacities as well: research, education, guiding, and direct experience. So there's going to be a lot to take in here, and before we do that, I want to take a moment to have us connect with ourselves at all of these levels. And so if it's helpful, maybe just close your eyes, shake it out, and take some nice deep breaths. And this is just as much for me as it is for you. So taking a nice deep breath down into your feet, feeling your feet and your seat connected to the earth and connected to the ground, connecting with body, connecting with Mama Earth. Drawing that earth energy up through your belly and into the heart center, and let that energy swirl and circulate around your heart space. And letting the energy move up the spine, through the backside of the brain, into the mind space, and letting the mind space just clear out and open itself up. And from there, feeling that energy circulate outside of your physical body, touching into the spirit that permeates around you, that's here with us, flowing through the field of each person, being here. Notice the shift in energy. Just whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes and look around the room and the space and just notice what's different when we connected all of these layers. So my invitation is to not just listen with your ears and your mind, but to listen with your full being, your full body, your full heart, your mind, and your spirit, because that's really why we're here, and that's what this work is about. So any good journey, we need to know, we need to map out where we are. So where the heck are we right now in this crossroads? Well, I would dare to say that we're kind of at the beginning, at least in now, right, in our immediate history. We have a much longer trajectory behind us, but this wave of the journey, we're kind of here at the entry point. We're at that point of defining and discovering who are we as a community and a people, and who do we want to be? And it's really important to take that pause, right? And if you've been in a journey space, you know there's a little of that like turbulence, right? There's some discomfort sometimes in that come up period that, like, it's not really awesome. It's uncomfortable and it's crunchy, and like there's some confronting before there's reaching that cruising altitude. But it's a really important phase also of self-discovery and introspection and learning about how we're wired and more about our nervous system. And so I would venture to say that's where we are right now as a collective, and we're learning about our collective nervous system. And so it makes sense there's the discomfort and kind of that conflict going on. And we're probably still figuring out where we stand as individuals in relation to all of this, because a lot is happening fast. And if one thing I know about working with trauma is, like, if you really want to do healing work with trauma, you got to slow things down. And so we're at the beginning of this phase, and I've kind of laid it out here so you can see there's many arcs. No matter what journey we're on, it's kind of all the same thing, right? And so in the design work that I used to do, it's the same thing. We define and we discover before we reach this peak of energy where we prototype, and then reflection and feedback, and then iteration. So that's the map that I'm proposing of where we are. At a practical level, there's a lot of things that are going on right now. And I'm not going to go into each of these right now with a great deal of detail, but I do think it's important to really name what's happening in the landscape. So, two really big important things to know about, and that I hope you're aware of, and you take some time to actually look into the specific details, are the two natural medicine voter initiatives that are currently gathering signatures for the potential to be on the ballot this November, as in 7 months away from now. So to just give you context. And so one is decriminalization, essentially rewriting the Controlled Substances Act in Colorado. And another looks a lot like the Oregon model. I don't know how closely you're following it, but it is more of a facilitated healing center model. So it's really important to know that these things are coming up quickly and to know where you stand. Another piece that I don't hear getting talked about all that much right now, but I feel is really important, is that there is a House bill that is has been created. It's up. It hasn't fully voted or passed, but it's specifically to take a year time frame to look at how to apply natural plant medicines to mental health specifically. And so that year time frame would allow there to be that research and that gathering and that discovery phase before making recommendations.
Is that a Colorado House bill or a U.S. House bill?
It's a Colorado House bill. I think it's 116 if I'm not mistaken. And then there's the Oregon Psilocybin program, and maybe you're like, who cares what's going on in Oregon? Well, I'll just read a quote here from Mason Marks, who's one of the advisory board members and part of Harvard Law. For better or worse, what inevitably happens is these rules will be copied and pasted to states around the country. It's already happening. And it's already happening, and there are a lot of issues that are being encountered. And I've spent countless hours, I don't know, it's like a mild obsession of mine, to look into what's going on, because it matters to me. It matters to me what's happening elsewhere and what might get copy-pasted here. I don't want to be copy-pasted, and I feel like we deserve better than that. Alongside that, we still have burgeoning psychedelic communities, and in particular around microdosing. It is just springing up everywhere, and communities are forming, and support people are forming. And so there is a groundswell that's happening, and it's not even in the underground per se. It's people on social media posting and talking about microdosing and sharing this information. And then of course we have mainstream media, which the research is now being channeled through, and headlines are being framed in such a way that is palatable for the mainstream. And then we have this interesting virtual reality phenomenon that's coming out, where people are talking about going into the virtual and psychedelic space, and I'm like, wait, isn't that kind of what they're for anyway? Confusing. And then last but not least, our favorite of industry and financial influence. So no matter if we don't agree on anything else here this evening, I think the one thing that we can agree on is that nearly everyone incorporating psychedelics and entheogens currently is at risk legally. And that's a problem. So promises. What are some of the promises that are being made here? And I don't want to go and read slide by slide by slide of everything, but I just kind of wanted to highlight some things here. And you might be thinking of things that I'm not, but these are just things that were top of mind for me. And you might not even view this as a promise, but some of the things, number one is like mass scale mental health improvement, right? And that's largely how so much of this is positioned, is like we need to do this in service of the people who need it the most, right? You've heard this. Equitable access, supposedly. Removing criminal penalties. It depends. Safety and ethics guidelines and reporting. Yeah, that's useful. So other things like promises, potentially like new licensed professions, new regulations for agriculture and property, a fast implementation, less than 2 years, high ROI for public and private investments, and funded public education programs, which is awesome. So, when we look at this through the frame of ethics, it's important to ask, and these are simple questions, but they actually are really, really deep. So number one is beneficence. Who actually benefits and how? And it's probably not a straightforward singular answer, but it's one to actually spend some time with. Who benefits here and how? Non-malfeasance. What are the potentials for harm in any model, in any proposition that we're facing? And then consent. Is there full disclosure and consent? Do we actually know enough detail about certain things before we say yes or before we say no? We might need to dig deeper. And so I urge you to hold this ethical lensing in mind. It's so simple, and I find when I can apply this framework, it really helps me formulate better decisions for myself. Money, sex, and power. They always enter the equation. And now is no different, right? I mean, aside from all of the things that we maybe are hearing kind of coming through with the media and like Cover Story and some of these stories that are coming out now. I don't know if you all are familiar with that podcast that's being put out by The New Yorker now. It's kind of scandalous and salacious. It's like a train wreck. But no, seriously, if you haven't heard it, I would say it's a good thing to listen to and at least be informed about. So pitfalls. You notice there are quite a few listed on here, and I won't go through these one by one because I'm going to pick a few of these out and just look at them in a little bit more detail. But just really quickly, I will highlight like potential conflicts of interest and concentration of power because you have appointed leaders, quick timelines that minimize public discourse. Service delivery methods, they're not really well tested yet. Oh yeah, banking and insurance is going to remain unavailable because it's still quite federally illegal, even if we pass legislation here. And so there are a lot of hidden things once you start to like uncover and look at the details. It's like, oh, now maybe I have information that I know about what I'm consenting to. So, this assumption about mental health and making it available and helping those who need it most. Psychedelic and research and policy are selling mental health treatment for who? 80% of participants in the large studies from the past 30 years are white. And they're being incredibly screened to be part of these studies as well. And the relational aspect, which Therapeutic research has shown over years and years and years that the relational aspect is the healing common factor amongst all methods and modalities. It's the relationship that's doing it. But the relationship's not being studied yet in psychedelic research, nor methodologies. And from what I understand, like MAPS has a list of about 15 different methods and modalities that could get applied. And so we don't actually really know the specifics, and we don't know what's working for whom, and it's normed on white populations. I just asked the question, are we the ones who need it the most? What can we learn about healing from indigenous rituals and other technologies, and support the rebuilding of communities as they heal from colonial trauma? This was a quote from a journal of psychedelic studies that I found recently. And then I'll further just say and share a little bit here, indigenous rituals involve all the senses through a variety of elements, including music, smell, language, and touch, to such a degree that it is difficult to isolate the effects of one element versus another. It is more likely that all the elements work together to bring about healing. And that's not even to speak for community, right? And so part of the reason that things are probably happening in this domain around ethics and touch is because we don't have this language even built into our natural culture. And we're sending out researchers who don't have touch training, and then we're saying that touch is the problem. Touch is not the problem. It's the unskillful use of these technologies that are the problem. An Oregon Psilocybin advisory member, it was widely promoted as a way to treat depression and trauma. I think there's been a disconnect in what voters were told to expect when they voted and now. Hello, Happy Mushroom. Not Schedule 1. Okay, some of you might get upset about me calling this one out, but ketamine clinics and training criteria are currently unregulated. I suggest we start there. So this is a Schedule 3 prescription medication, and it's already situated inside the medical system. And ketamine is being used off-label for all sorts of mental health treatment. I believe it's a beautiful medicine. And the fact is that there aren't really standards for regulations around the way that clinics are operating now. And so in my opinion, it would be a mistake to layer in additional medicines on top of a haphazardly built clinical paradigm. Thanks to legal loopholes and a patchwork of compelling research, ketamine clinics operate with limited oversight. And until federal agencies approve the use of any psychedelics to treat mental health, they will continue to write their own rules without regulation. And this was in the New York Times recently, highlighting some ketamine clinics, highlighting the fact that they were doing 15-minute integration conversations with a coach, not a therapist, and kind of sending people out the door and letting them go their way. And I think it was something about, is it mental health treatment or spa day with ketamine? So to me, this is the perfect place to develop our proof of concept and to really get it right and to prototype and iterate before we layer in more medicines and more regulations. Ronan Levy of Field Trip, I don't know if you're familiar with Field Trip, but they're becoming a nationwide ketamine clinic. We designed our clinics to be psychedelic agnostic. The only difference would be you wouldn't need a formal diagnosis of depression or anxiety or PTSD in Oregon. And so this is him speaking to his intention to build out clinics in Oregon. And some of you might say, well, yeah, but isn't there like a 5-clinic limit and da-da-da-da? Well, yeah, there is, and there are also loopholes, and I've heard people speaking about them, and there's a 2-year sunset period as well. And once that 2-year sunset period is up, then it seems like it's going to be fair game for large corporate clinics to come in and take up residents. More plant fun. Not Schedule 1. No surprise here that, some of the proposed initiatives and things have legal protection and rights that skew towards those who have financial capital. And there are the obvious and then the less obvious pieces of that. And so just imagining, like, I'm an independent practitioner. I don't make a lot of money, right? So if I imagine I wanted to open up a healing center, like, what would it actually take? Is that doable for me? Well, let's see, what would be the required financial outlay? You've got to purchase the building and the land, then there's the legal costs, which are going to be exorbitant because it's still not federally legal. There's all the regulatory expenses, and then there's insurance and banking, which I'll get back to in a moment, administration, staffing, and overhead. Right? And that's kind of like just to get your foot in the door. That's a lot of money. And I was reading an article the other day from this lawyer who was looking at more detail around what's happening in Oregon, and basically his position was like, there's not going to be insurance available for this. It's still Schedule 1 federally. And so as a facilitator or a healing center owner, let's imagine, like, I'm walking in and I also have no protection if something goes wrong. Furthermore, because of that, there's still a banking issue. So the financial transactions aren't going to be able to happen unless the federal government intervenes. And I believe there was something called the Cole Memorandum that happened that opened up for the cannabis industry that shifted some things. But like, these are the things that operationally are going to be really challenging when people actually start trying to put this framework into practice. A quote here, from a woman in Oregon. That's the biggest barrier for anyone jumping into this. If you don't have someone who's willing to invest in the land for you, or $1 million, or a way to leverage $1 million, it's going to be really tough to carve out a spot. So who's carving out the spots? Where's the carving coming from? You want to know that the people writing the rules are doing so in everybody's best interest and not in their own. Without such transparency, it's hard to know if people are developing rules to suit their own business interests. And so I just highlight this as an invitation of, to do the research. Like, let's look into who's writing the rules, who's on the steering committees, what are their professions, what are their potential conflicts of interest that they might be holding, right? And like I said in the beginning, I believe we can do better, and we have more possibilities than what are being presented to us. Yay, cannabis, sticky mistress. Schedule 1, but And the last thing that I just kind of want to highlight in this section is that, like, education is a priority. It shouldn't be tied to this false contingency of like, all right, now we have to do all of these like massive regulation things. And I don't know a lot about the law, but like, I was like, like, aren't we collecting marijuana taxes for educational purposes? Like, would it really be a stretch for us as citizens to come up with some sort of request to say, well, let's use this marijuana tax cash fund to create education in the psychedelic space and to create community education around harm reduction and all of the things that we need that are useful, but they don't need to be tied into a massive regulatory framework. And then just with regards to education, you know, really, if we're using the copy-paste model from Oregon, it's 160 hours for facilitator training, and that includes the practicum. I spent 500 hours getting my massage license. I spent 200 hours to get my yoga teaching certification. 160 hours just barely scratches the surface. And again, Mason Marks here. I'm convinced that it needs to be 2 to 3 times that. So I'm excerpting here something from one of the acts that has come up in service of just kind of holding the question of, is there another way that we can do this? Is there another way that we can ask for funding for public service announcements, educational curricula, and crisis response training? I believe the answer is yes. And I believe that we can be the ones that request that. So what's the story, Morning Glory? So, if these are nature's decentralized consciousness technologies, what operating systems do we want to install into the collective consciousness? I'd like to just offer cultural context as a place to start. Right, and the cultural context is going to be individual and community based. Looking at the environment and the social systems, the educational systems, and the way that consciousness is viewed deserves to happen in a way that is not just blanketed across. What's the relationship to body and heart and mind and spirit? And how can we start to structure our social paradigms in such a way that account for this and allow enough flexibility for people to be able to actually bring their value systems to the table, into the picture? The time is now to create a new paradigm and to create from this frame. This is just an idea of like multi-tiered education for a skilled community, right? So who do we have as the base? It's our actual community members, communitas in place. It's not the professional group, that's much higher up. And so if we start our education from that frame and create culturally relevant awareness in education as our foundation, and then we build our educational scaffolding from there, I believe we would be setting ourselves up for greater success. And then intimate relations. I mean, how many of you have journeyed with your friends, your loved ones, your partners, right? And so having that and having good information on like, yeah, what are some ethical things and preventative things that can come up? Let's start educating people about that. Journeying with oneself, navigation skills. What if we actually had psychedelic literacy as part of our culture? Social emotional literacy would be a great place to start. But these are the conversations and the questions that I think are great to ask now. And it's not until we move much farther up that we actually get into the realm of someone who might need a professional, and that's where we could start to share more integration skills. And then it moves up. Groups, relational skills, right? And these don't have to be held in the professional paradigm. Ceremony, spiritual skills. And so just what if? What if we start to build our culture and our communities from the ground up in this way? It's not the solution per se. I don't have all of the answers, but just offer this as a way to just start considering and thinking. Because organisms thrive in supportive conditions. And so that scattered way that everyone is hiding out underground and not really able to organize, if we remove some of these barriers and we create educational scaffolding, then what happens is the possibility for self-organizing communities to actually bond together and start to thrive and grow in a healthy way, in a healthy ecosystem. And the public forums can exist this is a public forum that exists, right? And let the communities come back in and report back what's working. What are the innovative, cool ideas? What are the issues that maybe need more attention and education? So holding public forum and ethics kind of conversations and fundamentally allowing the community organizing to happen from the bottom up, and let the communities inform the regulatory folks what they actually need. This is how I did good experience design, and this is how it worked. It wasn't imposing the company's will on people. You actually needed to know and understand what they valued most and build for that level of empathy. So possibilities, there's so many possibilities, and again, I don't want to take up a lot of time here, but return to holism in nature, prioritize Indigenous voices, protect nature and public spaces to have experiences, healing as a way of being for communities, hybridized skill shares, and decentralized education, encourage citizen research and ethics, long-lasting solutions over cut and paste regulations. And so that's an opportunity that I see of how we can map ourselves through this process, through the arc of the journey. And just if we start looking at it this way and asking these questions, it can be helpful. And we might not be ready to get to the peak yet, right? Like the peak's gonna happen when it's gonna happen. And if you try to force the thing, it's not a good time. I'll take a moment to just read something here that Rosalind Watts, one of the researchers at Imperial College, she wrote recently on Medium. 5 years ago, I stood on the stage at TEDx Oxford and attempted to answer the question, can magic mushrooms unlock depression? In the talk, I pleaded with the audience and with the world at large to take my words and the potential of these substances seriously. However, watching again today, I can't help but feel as if I unknowingly contributed to a simplistic and potentially dangerous narrative around psychedelics, a narrative I'm trying to correct. This current backlash to the backlash of the past, I see as a tidal wave of hype, overpromising, magical thinking, marketing, sugarcoating, simplistic sound bites, hopeful shareholders, gold-rushing, territory claiming. This wave has been accompanied by the sidelining of critical voices like those of the victims of sexual assault in the psychedelic context, turned away by countless respected professionals in the field lest they tarnish the shine. There are so many issues with having a zealous agenda to turn the tides. It comes from a good place originally, but now it all feels a bit like a PR campaign for a celebrity that was wrongfully imprisoned and now needs to be shown to be utterly beyond reproach, sunshine personified, a media onslaught of positivity, positioning them as superhero. But no superhero acts alone. They are part of a team. And so I'd invite you to just connect back into that place where we started, connecting back into your body and your heart and your mind and your spirit. And just feel what's true for you now. Feel into what you would like to see come forward, what you would like to see happen, what might be possible. And I'm actually going to invite you all, I think that there should be some note cards and a few pens at each table. And I actually want to just play a little music and have you take some time with this and feel into these spaces and write down what you would like to see happen, what's possible in this next step. And I'll collect these at the end if you'll leave them on the table. And I'll read them and compile them. And I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet. Probably share them with Noack. Probably share them with Noack, actually. I'm not gonna like publish them or that goes against the ethical thing, right? When you're having your consent about stuff. But yeah, I'd invite you to just take a minute and write, and then once we're done there, we'll spend some time doing Q&A. If you'd like a note card or a pen and you don't have one, there's some here on the table. I heard that there was a question as to whether this invitation was one for what you want for yourself personally or in a larger scale. And I wanna say start with self and expand out, right? And consider community. Absolutely, if there's like specific legislation things, like I can't make it happen, but please write it down, right? Like, I mean, we're here in a virtual reality anyway, so we may as well just say what we want. Just take a few more minutes here.
And I think Lucia, Miss Lucia Cherpak is going to help us with the Q&A. Yeah, so what I would like to suggest that you do with those is just fold them up and leave them at the center of your table. And I would love to collect them all and to share them with our friends here at NOAC. I know that I'm personally going to read each and every one. I won't put it on social media. I'm not even on social media. And it's really just to hear from the community voices. And perhaps if you, I don't know, consent to a quote being used in some form, perhaps you could just write consent on the back, like, yep, like I consent to this quote being used somehow. Yeah, because we might get something that seems really useful. I don't know.
All right, everybody. So let's give it up for Nicole Lilly. What a thought.